He had survived enemy fire in 3 countries, buried his wife, and lost his home. But nothing had prepared him for being told, quietly and politely, that he didn't belong in the front row of a ceremony built on the bones of men like him. Welcome back to Jack and Rex Tales. The morning came in slowly over Coronado. The Pacific was calm, impossibly calm, the kind of calm that feels like the ocean is holding its breath, waiting for something. From the cliffs above the bay, the water stretched toward the horizon in long, flat shades of blue, silver near the shore, deep gray further out where the channel ran cold. A destroyer moved through San Diego Bay in the far distance, so slow it barely seemed to move at all, just a dark shape dissolving into the morning. Jack Thompson stood at the edge of the parking lot and watched it go. He was 74 years old. His shoulders had curved slightly inward over the years, the way tall men's shoulders sometimes do when the world has pressed on them long enough. His gray beard was trimmed neatly. His navy blue jacket, the good one, the one he kept folded in the bottom of his backpack for occasions that mattered, had been repaired so many times the elbows were a different shade than the rest of the sleeves. He had pressed it the night before using the iron at the shelter on Market Street. He had wanted to look right. He had wanted, for once, to walk into a room and not feel like an apology. Rex stood beside him. The German Shepherd had turned 12 that spring, and the years had settled into his body the way years do, gently, without permission. His muzzle had gone almost completely white. His dark amber eyes still tracked everything, still missed nothing, but arthritis made him lower himself carefully whenever he sat, back legs first, like a man easing into a chair he isn't sure will hold him. Jack reached down. Rex leaned into his hand before the fingers even made contact. "You ready?" Jack asked quietly. Rex looked up at him. That was enough. They walked together toward the ceremony grounds, Jack's worn boots moving slowly across the grass, Rex matching his pace the way he always had, not ahead, not behind, exactly beside. The new Navy SEAL Memorial was everything the photographs in the invitation had promised. White chairs arranged in long, perfect rows across a wide lawn, American flags snapping in the ocean breeze, the sound of them like something between applause and warning. Military families moved through the crowd in dark suits and pressed dresses. Active duty SEALs in dress uniforms stood near the stage. Cameras, reporters, a podium draped with bunting. And somewhere behind that podium, Jack had been told, the President of the United States would be speaking in less than an hour. Jack reached into his jacket pocket and took out the invitation. The paper had gone soft from being unfolded so many times. He had read it nearly every day since it arrived at the shelter 3 weeks ago. The woman at the front desk had held it up when he came in from the rain, confused by the official seal on the envelope, and Jack had stood in the doorway, dripping, and stared at it for a long moment before taking it from her hands. He still wasn't entirely sure he believed it. Front row, seat A1, guest of honor. He folded it carefully and put it back in his pocket. Rex nudged his hand with his nose. Jack smiled. "Yeah, me too." The seating area was already filling when they arrived. A young woman in a dark blazer moved through the crowd with a clipboard directing guests, smiling with the practiced warmth of someone doing a job they were good at. She intercepted Jack and Rex before they reached the first row. "Good morning, sir." Her smile was professional, polished. "Morning," Jack said. Her eyes moved to Rex. The smile changed, not gone, but adjusted, tightened at the corners. "I'm so sorry, but animals aren't permitted in the reserved seating area." Jack looked down at Rex, then back at her. "He's not really an animal." She blinked. "He's family," Jack said simply. There was a moment, a brief, almost imperceptible moment, where something uncertain crossed her face. Then training reasserted itself. "I understand, sir, but regulations are regulations. We have a very specific seating protocol for this section." Jack started to reach into his pocket, started to unfold the invitation, started to explain that he had a seat assignment, that there was a placard with his name on it somewhere in that front row, that he had been formally designated the guest of honor for this ceremony. Then he stopped, because something in him was simply tired. Not physically. He had been physically tired for years. This was something older and heavier, the exhaustion that comes from explaining yourself to people who have already decided what you are, from justifying your presence in rooms you were invited into, from spending decades of your life in service to something vast and important, and then spending the years after that becoming invisible to the very country you served. He had been invisible for a long time now. He folded the invitation and put it back in his pocket. "All right," he said. The coordinator's shoulders relaxed. "There are folding chairs near the back where you'll be very comfortable." "Thank you," Jack said. He said it and meant it. He had never been the kind of man who made things hard for people just doing their jobs. He turned away and Rex followed without being asked, and together they walked to the back of the crowd and found 2 folding chairs at the far edge of the lawn. Jack sat in one, Rex settled carefully onto the grass beside him. From here, the stage was small and far away. The empty front row seat was invisible. Jack sat with his hands folded in his lap. He watched the flags move in the breeze. He listened to the ocean. A memory came, the way memories always come when you sit still long enough, without warning, without mercy. A small house near Portland, Maine, 3 years ago, rained against the windows. A hospital bed they had moved into the living room because Sarah had wanted to see the yard, had wanted the morning light through the glass doors, had wanted to die in the room where they had danced on their anniversary every year for 47 years. She had reached for his hand that last week, her fingers trembling, lighter than he remembered. She had pointed toward Rex, who was sleeping on the floor beside the bed, nose resting on his paws. "When I'm gone," she had whispered. Jack had shaken his head immediately. Sarah had smiled at him, that smile that had always known more than he was ready to hear. "When I'm gone," she said again, softly, "he'll keep watch." Jack couldn't answer. His throat had locked. His eyes were burning. Sarah squeezed his hand with what strength she had left. "And when the world forgets who you are," she said, "he won't." She was gone 3 weeks later. Rex never left Jack's side after that. Not when the medical bills came, not when the house went, not when Jack found himself carrying everything he owned in a single backpack through the streets of a city that moved too fast for men who moved too slow. Rex had simply stayed, every morning, every night, still watching. A sound of feedback from the stage microphone pulled Jack back to the present. The ceremony was beginning. A chaplain offered a prayer. A color guard posted the colors. Then the announcer's voice rose over the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States." The applause was immediate and enormous. Jack pressed his palms together quietly. He clapped with everyone else, even from the back row, even from the folding chair. Rex watched his face. At the podium, the president adjusted the microphone and looked out over the crowd. He was a tall man, silver-haired, with the particular stillness of someone who had learned how to stand in the middle of enormous noise without being moved by it. He thanked the organizers, he thanked the families, He spoke about sacrifice and the way people who understand sacrifice speak about it, not in grand abstractions, but in the weight of specific things. Then it paused. His eyes had moved, as they sometimes do during large ceremonies, to the seating chart in front of him on the podium, a small card placed there by his advance team. His gaze dropped to it, then lifted, then dropped again. He leaned toward the aide standing 2 steps behind him. "Seat A1, he said quietly. "Who's supposed to be in seat A1? The aide checked his clipboard. His face shifted almost imperceptibly. "Jack Thompson, sir, the guest of honor, retired Navy SEAL, 3 tours, 2 Silver Stars. He's the reason this memorial exists. He's the veteran whose story started the entire fundraising campaign 2 years ago." The president looked at the empty chair. "Where is he?" The aide didn't have an answer. The president straightened. He looked out at the crowd for a long moment. Then, in a voice that carried clearly through every speaker on the lawn, he said, "Before I continue, I need to ask, is Jack Thompson here today?" The crowd murmured, heads turned. In the back row, on a folding chair at the edge of the lawn, an old man in a navy blue jacket with mismatched elbows went very still. Rex lifted his head. "Jack Thompson," the president said again, "the man this memorial was built to honor. I'm told he was assigned seat A1. That seat is empty. I'd like to know why." Silence. Then a ripple moved through the crowd as people began turning, searching. The event coordinator near the front row had gone pale. The president stepped away from the podium. Not to the side, not to an aide. He descended the 3 steps from the stage and walked into the crowd himself. No hesitation, no ceremony about it. Just a tall man in a dark suit walking between the rows of white chairs with a quiet, deliberate purpose. People stepped back as he passed. The crowd parted in a long, slow wave. And at the end of that wave, at the very back of the lawn, a Secret Service agent touched his earpiece and said something low, and the president kept walking until he reached the last row of folding chairs and found an old man sitting with his hands folded in his lap and a white-muzzled German shepherd lying at his feet. Jack looked up. He had the eyes of a man who had stopped expecting things. The president stopped in front of him. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then the president said, very quietly, "Are you Jack Thompson?" Jack's voice, when it came, was steady. It had always been steady. "Yes, sir." "Why are you sitting back here?" Jack was quiet for a moment. Rex pressed his nose against Jack's hand. Jack looked down at him, then back up. "Someone told me there wasn't room for him up front." He paused. "Where he goes, I go." Something moved across the president's face. Not a performance, something real and unguarded that the cameras caught but couldn't quite name. He reached out his hand. Jack took it. "Then you both come with me," the president said. He didn't walk ahead. He walked beside Jack, slowly, matching the old man's pace, the way Rex had always matched it, back through the parted crowd, past the white chairs, past the color guard, and past the faces of admirals and senators and donors who watched in complete silence. Rex walked on Jack's other side. The 3 of them moved together toward the front of the lawn. When they reached seat A1, the president gestured toward it. Jack sat down. Rex settled carefully onto the grass beside him, back legs first, slow and deliberate, and rested his white chin on Jack's shoe. Jack pressed his lips together. He looked at the ocean. He heard Sarah's voice. He won't forget. His eyes filled. He didn't look away from the water. The president returned to the podium. He stood there for a moment without speaking, looking at the old man in the front row with the white-muzzled dog at his feet. Then he said simply, "That man gave this country everything he had, and then he gave it more. The least this country can do is give him the front row." The applause began slowly. Then it wasn't applause anymore. It was something larger than that. Jack Thompson sat in seat A1 and looked at the Pacific Ocean and thought about Sarah and about Rex and about all the mornings he had woken up on a shelter cot and wondered if any of it had mattered. Rex pressed closer against his leg. It had mattered. It had always mattered. Somebody had just needed to walk to the back row and say so. This story carries significant value on multiple levels. At its most human level, it speaks to the epidemic of veteran invisibility in America, the painful and well-documented reality that men and women who served with extraordinary distinction return home to poverty, homelessness, and a quiet social erasure that no medal can undo. The story does not treat this as a political issue. It treats it as a human one, which is where it belongs. Older viewers who lived through the Vietnam era in particular will recognize the specific grief of a generation of warriors who came home to silence rather than gratitude, and who never fully recovered from that silence. Beyond veterans, the story speaks to every older American who has felt the slow, accumulating experience of becoming invisible, who has stood in a room and understood, without anyone saying so, that the world has quietly moved on without him. Jack's exhaustion in that moment at the seating area, the moment he simply stops trying to explain himself, is one of the most universal feelings a human being can carry. And seeing it honored rather than dismissed carries enormous emotional weight for viewers who have lived it themselves. Rex's role in the story carries its own layer of value. The bond between an aging man and his aging dog, two creatures who have both slowed down, both been worn by the world, both leaning on each other simply to keep going, reflects something deeply true about the healing power of animal companionship, particularly for isolated elderly people and veterans dealing with grief and loss. Sarah's parting words and Rex's wordless fulfillment of them across years of hardship model a kind of loyalty and love that transcends language. Finally, the president's action, not sending an aide, not making a gesture from the stage, but physically walking to the back row, models something quietly important about what dignity looks like in practice. Dignity is not a speech. It is not a plaque. It is a person choosing to walk across a room and sit with someone the world has overlooked. That is a lesson worth carrying long after the story ends.